Good afternoon, I'm Edward Probert. This is the daily reflection for Monday the 22nd of March from Salisbury Cathedral, where I am the Canon Chancellor. Welcome. In early spring every year, there emerges into our house a great horde of ladybirds, and each year they fail to find their way out of the house. So today, just as an example, I have gathered up in the windows of 2 floors of this house 61 of these colourful beetles, and I put them all out of our windows. The tools of this task are rather simple. They are this card box from which I've taken out my business cards, and this postcard from my brother-in-law, and I just simply flick them in there by their tens, in fact, and then put them out the window. They come out into our house in greater numbers on sunny days than they do on the gloomy or cold days, and they come out mostly at the sunnier times of day, hence my gathering up just before and just after lunch, so many today. Well, there we are. We have been getting these insects since the end of February this year, which we've had colder and less sunny days than today, so they haven't always come in that vast number that I managed today, but there's been, I should think, an average of 20 or more every day, which over that period of 3 or more weeks is an easy total of 500 or so, just from the windows of this house. But of course, I'm only actually catching, or seeing indeed, the ones that emerge on our side of the windows. But since all those insects got in there in the autumn from the other side, from outside, to find a place to rest for the winter, I guess the majority of them actually find their way out there and not in here. So there really must be a vast number of these little creatures tucked away in their crevices and the nooks of our windows, and exclusively, I should say, of our sash windows, of the sash windows at the front of the house, and not of all of them. In fact, they don't bother with the ground floor, where there's many sash windows. They do like the top floor. There are 5 sash windows facing south up there, and there are always plenty to be found in those 2 rooms. They like it here in my study, where there are 2 sash windows either side of where I'm looking here. But curiously, the 3 sash windows in the neighbouring room there, where my wife has her study, hardly an insect appears in those. Well, that's all very odd, isn't it? This is one of the many things that catches my attention. I'm trying to work while all this is going on, but this annual migration on their part into our space is really in my line of sight in a way it wouldn't normally be. So I have a chance now to look at them in more detail. They're really quite interesting little creatures. They are far from having just the one pattern. They have any number of different patterns amongst these hundreds of insects I've looked at this year, and they're not at all of only one size. And this pattern of not bothering with half the windows, at least, in the house, but favouring others which don't seem to me in any marked way different, is a curious idiosyncrasy on their part. I can't see why they prefer my study to Caroline's. I find her a perfectly nice person to live with. I rather like it, actually, so I can't see why it should put them off. But there you are. Up to this point in every previous year we've lived in this house, I wouldn't have seen this in such detail because I haven't spent my time in this room. I've largely worked from offices elsewhere in the Cathedral Close. And like everyone else, more or less, having spent all this time over the past year in my study, in my home, and not elsewhere, I've seen all of this from a much closer vantage point. In strolling around the garden at lunchtime, I noticed we're back at a point in the year where I found myself making a reflection in our early days of doing these reflections a year ago, when I talked about, from the garden indeed, about blossom on the plum trees and other trees around me. Well, I won't do that again, although we're back pretty much to that season again. But it is a reminder that we have spent a year in this kind of situation. I have now seen an annual cycle from the vantage point of my study. This has been a year of my life, a year of yours, a year of our nations, and a year of our worlds. It's been a costly and life-changing in all sorts of ways this year. Not, I guess, for the ladybirds and the aphids that they'll eat, and for the flowering trees which sustain them all. It's been a year for them too. But for them, it's another year of getting on with business, the new opportunities of this spring, doing what comes naturally, serving God in their own ways. They are not, to the best of my observation, very reflective creatures, any of these. They just do their stuff, and I thank God for that. We, however, do have our God-given capacities. We can ponder, we can think beyond the moment and the instincts of the moment. We can consider, we can weigh up the good and the bad, the past and the future. Tomorrow is actually the anniversary, the first anniversary of our first ever national lockdown. And that will be a part of this process of reflection. It's been penciled in fact, as a national day of reflection by the Church of England and by other organisations too. It will be marked in various ways, including by a live-streamed minute of silence in the middle of the day tomorrow. I invite you, of course, to take part in that, and you'll probably be invited by my colleagues too, and I presume by other organisations beyond. But having paused and pondered, we also need to emulate our friends, our neighbours from the natural world. These things that are less reflective than us. We too need to get on with the life that we've been given. That life is a precious gift of God for us, as it is for those ladybirds and much more beyond. And in that precious gift, with all its strange twists and turns, we discern, if we have the eyes and the mind for it, the grace and the glory of God. I'm going to finish with a poem I often revert to, by that puzzling poet Gerard Manley Hopkins. Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies of couple colour as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim, fresh fire-cold chestnut falls, finches' wings, landscape plotted and pieced, fold, fallow, and plough, and all trades, their gear and trackle and trim. All things counter, original, spare, strange, whatever is fickle, freckled, who knows how, with swift, slow, sweet, sour, a dazzle, dim. He fathers forth, whose beauty is past change. Praise him. Thank you, goodbye.